What's happening, everyone, and welcome back to the Pathways to Success podcast. I'm very excited about our guest on the show today, and it is Michael Gorton, who is the founder of Teladoc and a 12-time serial entrepreneur. His companies have generated over $6 billion in net worth. He's a best-selling and award-winning author of the books Broken Handoff and Forefathers and Founding Fathers. Today, he's the CEO of Back to Space, a transmedia company which has produced the successful YouTube program Space Newsflash. Michael, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you, Julian. It's great.
Yeah, I'm delighted to have you here. So we connected through LinkedIn, right?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, and
you're the master. I am the student.
I have a lot to learn for sure. So, and that's part of the reason why I love creating content, because it's so amazing how you're able to sort of attract incredible individuals. This podcast gives me a reason to interview fascinating people, and I'm humbled to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Same here.
So, Michael, you've done incredible things in your life, and I'm always curious about kind of the origin story. How does someone come to be who they have become? So I'm curious, how did you first get into entrepreneurship and knew you had ability here?
I was in law school, had to do a project, called a friend in Mexico and said, I'm going to send you some computers. And I had to go through the export process. He took them and, unbeknownst to me, sold them. He called me and he said, I want 6 more. And I said, no, I don't think so. But I was working as an engineer for a corporation, going to law school at night. And I thought, wow, I could do this on my own. And that's when I became an entrepreneur.
And that's when you became an entrepreneur. So have you had typical corporate jobs, or was that transition into entrepreneurship pretty early on?
I've had one corporate job. I worked for the power company, and I got to do everything an engineer could imagine at the power company. But yeah, just one.
Gotcha. So that first enterprise, was that selling the computers?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did very specialized computers worldwide. Got robbed blind, and then started an internet company.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, do you think everyone can be an entrepreneur? Or do you think some people are just kind of wired that way? What do you think?
I think you have to be wired.
You have to be
wired.
wired.
I have friends in corporate America tell me all the time they want to become an entrepreneur. And I tell them, you have higher highs, lower lows, sometimes in the same day. Mm-hmm. It's tough. You have to be really solid and confident to drive into the parking lot one day, have 80 people working for you, and not enough money for payroll. Mm-hmm. It takes a special kind of person to do that.
What is the evidence of a wiring of an entrepreneur? If someone had children, right? What are some of these characteristics we could spot early on?
Oh my gosh. So independence is one. Yeah. I think in order to be an entrepreneur, you have to be confident, you have to be creative, and you have to not give up no matter what. And when I'm interviewing new people to work for me, mm-hmm. I always sneak in a question or two. I want them to tell me about situations they've been in that were almost impossible, where everybody said, there's no way you can succeed here. Mm-hmm. And if they figured it out, I think they have the elements of an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, for me, I thought I was going to be a corporate guy when I graduated from college, and then I found myself without work with the whole great recession thing, right? And I was a recruiter. I was a guy that helped people find jobs. And for me, I started to realize I never wanted to be dependent on somebody else for income. Mm-hmm. And I realized that one of my core values was autonomy. It's just I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And that ultimately led me down this path. And 13 years later, I was able to pull it off, right? So
yeah, no, I mean, listen, within 5 minutes of the first time you and I had a conversation, I knew you were an entrepreneur. So, sometimes you can get it really quickly. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it has to be developed.
Yeah, I think it was all practice for me to get to where I am right now. So I want to talk about the book because I think it so codifies so many of the lessons that you've learned building 12 companies. So mm-hmm. Tell us, what inspired you to write this book?
The first major liquidity event I did was in 1999 and 2000, and it was a $122 million transaction for an internet company I had built. Mm-hmm. And it fell apart as I watched it and couldn't stop it. And I thought, the title of the book is Broken Handoff, and when you look at what an entrepreneur wants to accomplish and what either the M&A partner or the funding partner wants to accomplish, they're not exactly the same. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, okay, how can I put together? In the beginning, it was a book that I thought was going to be specifically for the entrepreneurs. But ultimately, I thought, all parties can benefit from an analysis. And, getting back to your questions in just a second, the one thing I will tell you is the amount of losses in this M&A and funding are in the trillions of dollars per year.
Wow.
And if you can impact 10% of that, you're adding hundreds of billions of dollars to the economy. And so that was really the goal. Mm-hmm. How do we fix that?
And what do you think are the big specific takeaways you hope your readers get from reading the book?
Yeah. So, the one thing that I've come to saying recently is there's an old phrase, and that is the early bird gets the worm. Uh-huh. And everybody knows that, right? And every entrepreneur knows if you're going to be successful, you've got to be the early bird. Mm-hmm. But there's a second part of that phrase that's not used as much, and that is the second mouse gets the cheese. And so, okay, in order to be successful as an entrepreneur, I've got to be the early bird. But think about the first mouse. What happened to him? Mm-hmm. The mousetrap closes, the cheese is still there. And the second mouse, Herman, comes by and goes, "Oh, Sam, I'm so sorry, but thanks for the cheese." Mm-hmm. Right? And so the thing is, as the entrepreneur, you're building something amazing. And oftentimes dying in the process, right? Yep. And the second guy gets the wealth from it. And so how do we fix that? That's one of the goals of the book, Broken Handoff.
Okay. So it helps in the planning phase, like helping them avoid the potholes?
Right.
Okay.
Well,
gotcha.
Avoid the potholes, and no, because if you're building an entrepreneurial endeavor, the thing that you want to do is you want to get to a point somewhere along the way where you're either making a lot of money from the cash flows, or you're selling the company for a nice liquidity event. And we all hear those fairy tale stories that are part of the American dream, and they happen, but they could happen a lot more than they do. And that's the goal of the book, is to make them happen more often. How do we educate the funding partners, the M&A partners, and the entrepreneurs so that there are less failures? That $3.5 trillion of losses every year should be less. Mm-hmm. How do we make it less?
Gotcha. So when you built 12 companies, mm-hmm. and the one that I was most familiar with was Teladoc.
Yeah.
How many different kinds of companies? Like what are the different kinds of businesses that you started?
Okay, so people think I'm insane because my first company was the computer company, the International Trade, and then I built a consulting company to help early stage. Okay. I built education companies. I built a record label, the telemedicine company, Teladoc. So it's across the board, and all of them are different, but fundamentally, building a successful company is about a couple of things. It's about having a great idea, surrounding yourself by people that really understand the space, and listening to them. As a mentor, I work with entrepreneurs all the time. This is really true of male entrepreneurs more than female entrepreneurs, but male entrepreneurs bring their ego to everything. And if you want to be successful as an entrepreneur, you have to check your ego at the door. You cannot bring it into the boardroom. You're there to do what is best for the company, not best for your pride. And I think, you surround yourself by people that are smarter than you, and you listen to them, whether your pride allows it or not.
So that's what I thought was really fascinating about you, because the entrepreneurial genius that you have is able to spread across in different kind of genres, right? So I'm curious, what have you come to know about yourself? What is your gift as an entrepreneur?
I would say finding those smarter people and inspiring them to join the team. And, I can't tell you how many times there's been somebody that I really wanted, and they said no. And I asked them again, and they said no. And I just, I came to this meeting today from one where a gentleman in town, I think I asked him 15 times before I got him to yes. And the amount of value he brought to me over the years, and this was in the late 90s when I finally convinced this gentleman to help me. And the amount of value he's brought me over the years has been incalculable. And but I had to take no from him a lot.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I think that's it. How do you start with a good idea, obviously? And in my particular case, I like things that change the world. So Teladoc is clearly one of them.
Yeah.
The one that I did in the late 90s was called Internet Global. And Internet Global introduced some brand new technologies. So that's always fun also. But ultimately, find an idea that can change everything and then surround yourself by the people that can help make it happen.
How do you know when an idea is a great idea that could work, that could turn into a business?
Yeah. So I love telling this. In Teladoc, it was really clear to me because we have big problems with our healthcare system. And part of them are that we have this giant engine that's sometimes serving small problems. In the beginning of Teladoc, what I used to say is, imagine that you walk in your front yard and you see an ant mound. So in Texas, we have fire ants, right? Maybe some people that are listening don't have fire ants, but for those of you that don't, I'll tell you, you don't want to step in them. You get bit by a fire ant, you remember it for days.
Yeah.
But so if you walk out in your front yard and you see a fire ant mound, in healthcare, what we do is we go back in the house, we call the Pentagon, they send a platoon, they send tanks, and they send air support. That's how we fix the smallest problems in healthcare. And in Texas, what we know is, what you really do is you go in your garage, you get a teaspoon of whatever it is that you use, put it on the fire ant mound, and they're gone. If you have a minor issue, you know what it is. Your doctor is clearly going to know what it is. That was Teladoc. Let's get the doctor and the patient together in the simplest environment possible, a telephone, where nobody has to travel. The questions are asked by the doctor. The patient answers the questions. Voila, you have XYZ. You need an antibiotic. That was the Teladoc business model, and it was taking something that was really complex and making it very, very simple. And when you have something like that, you can change everything. The great corollary to that story is we tested it, it worked. We went to the board of medical examiners, and with all of our excitement, myself and my medical doctor founder, Dr. Brooks, we told the story, and they told us, Mr. Gorton, if you build this company, you're going to prison. And so, at first it crushes you, right?
Yeah, right.
But then you think about it a second and you go, wow, I really do have something now.
Yeah.
But that's where you get tested. Are you really an entrepreneur or not? We didn't go to prison.
Yeah.
But Teladoc has got 32 million members. They're delivering doctors in 10 minutes worldwide. So
that's incredible. So the first step, idea, finding great people smarter than you, testing it sort of in a small way.
Correct.
How do you know after months or years of pouring into this business that you think it's still a good idea, but it's not working? How do you know when to quit or to change?
Oh, yeah. So whenever I sign my book, I always say, never give up, ever. And I have friends who tell me, there really are times to give up.
Yeah.
There are ideas that aren't that great, and maybe you should give up. But I think, it's really that point is addressed to the people who can think their way through a problem. Because, there are issues, whether they be in business or love or life or medicine, where there's a wall in your way, and everybody is going to tell you it can't be torn down, you can't get over it, you can't get around it. And the great entrepreneurs do. Mm-hmm. They figure out the way. And but clearly there are entrepreneurs who keep beating the dead horse, and maybe they shouldn't be. And maybe those people need to go back to corporate America, because they'd be great employees there, But
when adversity hits you, how does your mind process that?
Yeah.
Fear, failure, what does that look like in your head?
So I think like everybody in the beginning, when something adverse hits, it makes you step back. But I seldom have a situation where adversity hits where I don't look at it and say, how do I turn this problem into success? And it's my personal opinion that the bigger the adversity, the bigger the problem, the more valuable the solution.
Yeah.
And obviously we can't do the Star Trek beam them up, Scotty, right now. Mm-hmm. But there are solutions that we're within months or years of solving, that it's just going to take somebody determined that says, I can get through this wall. And those are the kind of problems we like to find.
What role has branding been or played in the success of any of your enterprises?
I have no idea. That's one of those things where I absolutely would say the surround yourself by people smarter than you and listen to what they have to say. In the beginning of Teladoc, I will tell you, Dr. Brooks wanted to call it cyber medical services. So imagine that.
Cyber medical services, yeah.
But we brought some marketing people in and we debated it, and we ended up with Teladoc, which was a clever name.
Totally.
It had multiple meanings, but from the marketing perspective, I'm totally subordinate to whoever I trust and is smarter. I know one of my favorite marketing people ever is a lady named Laura Carabello, who runs a group called CPR. And she said to me the first time she met, when she was teaching me about what to do, she said, you're going to be on the stage, you're going to be talking to a lot of people, don't wear white socks. And I will tell you, there have been a couple of times when I intentionally wore white socks so I could pull up my sleeve, my pants leg, and say, this is for you, Laura.
So as far as, let's say, the potholes then, what are the most common potholes you see when you're advising, let's say, startup entrepreneurs?
Yeah.
What do they make?
I think the biggest thing is understanding what your resources are. Almost every startup entrepreneur needs money. Mm-hmm. And raising capital is a difficult task that if you are an entrepreneur, you've got to get good at it. So I think that's one of the primary things. But the other thing is, entrepreneurs tend to be well-educated, creative people. And the other thing the entrepreneur has to realize if they're going to be successful is you have to clean the toilets and you have to negotiate the $1 million deals. Mm-hmm. You are not above any task in the company when you're the startup entrepreneur. You've got to be willing and able to do everything.
You said creative, and I think entrepreneurs are problem solvers. When you are stuck on a problem, what do you do to induce states of creativity? Do you have a methodology to whiteboard a solution? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I think exercise is a great thing. Get away from the whole thing. Think about something completely different. If that doesn't help, then start calling your friends, and call people that have no idea what you're doing, and just start telling them and hear and listen to what that their response is, mm-hmm. and you'll get some amazing ideas from both of those things: exercise and listening to friends.
You have an entrepreneur, has a good idea, has a good team, builds a product or service. What's the first step in associating a price to the value?
Well, valuation is sort of a magic game. Mm-hmm. In the world of raising capital and deciding on valuation, you have something called goodwill. And goodwill is one of those things that you think you're worth this, your funding partner thinks you're worth something else. And the thing you have to recognize as an entrepreneur is, who is the person who's going to write the check? What is their motivation? Because it could be one of two things. It could be one, I'm on the board of a company that has developed a non-invasive blood glucose meter, i.e., we can find out what your blood sugar level is without touching blood anymore, right? And the that changes everything. So if you are the investor and you look at that deal, you say, I want as much of that deal as possible, and therefore I need to negotiate down. If you're the entrepreneur, you have to look and say, what is their motivation? Is it to make more money, or do they have a child that's diabetic and they want to see this problem solved? Mm-hmm. So as the entrepreneur, when you're out trying to solve your capital raise problem, understand who your potential check writer is, because if their job, if they're a venture capital group, their job is to find great deals and great ideas and get them for as low a price as possible. Mm-hmm. And then once they own them, then they can grow them. So you have to understand that. And I think for the early stage entrepreneur, raising capital is obviously, that's a big deal.
Gotcha. What's the best piece of advice anyone has ever given you to succeed in entrepreneurship?
Nathan Morton, who built the business model for Target, Home Depot, and an old store called CompUSA.
CompUSA?
Yeah.
I worked at CompUSA for 7 years.
So Nathan, so not a story for this, but sure. But a great story.
Yeah.
Nathan told me that if you're building anything, figure out what it's going to look like 5 or 10 years from now, and build the foundation for that now. So we're not building log cabins if we're entrepreneurs. We're building cities, and if you build your city, if you build, for example, I think everybody knows Target, right? So you have to think about, what is this going to look like when it's 200 stores and 500 stores? And let's build the foundation of that now, so that we're not rebuilding and rebuilding and rebuilding every step along the way. And so if you imagine what your structure is going to look like, focus on the foundation now, and then you can build the 70-story walls on top of that foundation.
Gotcha.
And great piece of advice.
Yeah. What else? Before we kind of close on our last sort of point here, what else would you want to share about succeeding in business and entrepreneurship?
Well, I think the primary thing is, if you have a great idea, don't ever give up. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think if we start there and we end there and everybody gets that, I think then we've succeeded.
Awesome. So, Michael, I want to close with success in life. How do you define personal success? What is a life well lived according to you? Wow.
I think translating from the world of business, if you're an entrepreneur, you're probably spending a lot more time focusing on the business side of your world. Mm-hmm. The great news about being an entrepreneur is, people ask me what I do for work, and I tell them I haven't worked since I left the power company years ago. Yeah. And so, I'm passionate about the things I do, and I don't consider them work. I can work on Saturdays and Sundays on projects associated with the various companies I'm involved in, and it doesn't make me mad. Some people don't look forward to Monday; they look forward to Friday, so they can have those the weekend off, and it doesn't matter to me. I don't differentiate. But when you live that lifestyle, you have to recognize that most of the world doesn't, and so again, you in the entrepreneurial world, you want to surround yourself by people who are smarter than you, that you can listen to. And when you're an entrepreneur, you want to surround yourself by people that recognize who you are and what you are. And if all of your friends are Monday to Friday, play all the rest of the time, then you're going to be disjointed. And so surround yourself by people who are always passionate about what they're doing, and then weekends, you can go climb mountains if you want. But your brain is also always processing those other things that you're passionate about. And you don't get in trouble with your friends or family when they understand who you are and what you are.
Yeah. That's actually what I wanted to ask. You mentioned climbing mountains. I believe you are you're climbing the highest point of elevation in every state. You're at 41.
Correct.
Is that
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? You hear a lot about this debate of some entrepreneurs say there is work-life balance, there's not. Like, how do you set guidelines with the family? Like, what does that look like in your life?
Well, okay, so you brought up the high point thing, so I have to finish it.
Sure, yeah.
I climbed Kilimanjaro in 2000, and coming back, it was like, okay, what now? And what can I do living the life of an entrepreneur where I'm constantly going? So Kilimanjaro, I was gone for 3.5 weeks. Wow. And I don't think I've taken anything longer than maybe 5 days of vacation since then. But to me, life is a vacation every day.
Yeah.
So what can I do with my kids as they're growing up to let them see the wilderness and let them see something that's really difficult? And mountain climbing is a great example of it. So, looking at the 50 states, there are places like Florida that's you drive up and it's a roadside park. And there's places like Maine. Katahdin, Maine is not that high a mountain. It's a bear. There's no trail. It's just one rock after another. And then Texas, where we live now, has the highest point of elevation east of the Rockies. So you can take your kids, your friends, your family, and go do these mountains, and they're hard. And Kennedy said in his moon speech, we choose to do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. Yeah. And what can you learn from that? What can you teach your children by putting them in an environment that's pristine and beautiful, but they have to train for it. They have to be ready, and they're gonna and it's hard. It teaches them about life and in my humble opinion, also about how to be a great entrepreneur.
Yeah. I love it. Do you have a morning routine? Do you have a regimen that you stick to every single day to set you up for success? What does that look like?
Yeah, I like to. I wake up real early. So
what's real early?
5:30.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm a 7-hour. I want to get 7 hours of sleep. So that means I'm in bed 10:30ish to 11ish, and then I accomplish what I want to by getting up early in the morning. But I think the first thing in the morning, you have to look and say, okay, what happened yesterday that's still open? And then the next thing is, what's on my calendar today? You cannot let your day control you, because it's so easy, especially in this digital age. Oh, I've got email. Oh, I've got people calling me. And in order to be successful, I think you have to know what's left open from yesterday and what is to be done today, and you have to focus on those things and make sure that all the rest of these things that come through us or to us through the digital world don't stop us from us accomplishing. I heard something the other day where a guy said he had written 27 books, and people said, how did you write 27 books? And he said, I wrote those books while you were watching television. And so this digital entertainment, which I think is valuable. At the end of the day, you're exhausted. Find something relaxing to do. Maybe it's go for a run. Maybe it's watch a TV show. But you cannot let the day control you. You have to know what's on my list for the day and get it accomplished.
So it seems like health and wellness is very important to you. I believe you're also working on your 3rd-degree black belt, right?
Yes,
in Kenpo,
I am.
right?
Yep.
So what's the best lesson that you've ever learned that has yielded a measurable result in increasing and sustaining your energy and enthusiasm?
Let's see, Newton's law that says a body in motion tends to stay in motion.
Keep going.
Yeah. So, if you stop and sit too long, i.e., for weeks or months, let your computer control you, then your efficiency will go way down. And so you've got to keep running or lifting weights or doing karate or whatever it is you do. Keep doing it, because when you stop, a body at rest tends to stay at rest.
Yeah. I hear a lot of entrepreneurs talk about part of the reason they're so connected to their work is they find meaning and purpose to it. Do you believe there is a purpose to the way that you do things, to your life?
Yes.
Philosophically, what does that look like to you?
Well, I like to take on projects that I think change everything. Teladoc was Internet Global. In the beginning of Internet Global, we were one of the first internet providers anywhere. I would go to the Chamber of Commerce or Rotary Club, anybody who would let me speak, and try to imagine before email addresses, before websites, standing in front of crowds of old codgers and saying, this is an email address, and by the end of the 90s, everybody will have one.
Yeah.
Most of the people thought we were quacks, right? And so, you have to find these things that are going to drive you and sustain you as you build something.
What is your philosophy in life? Like, if there's something, a guiding principle that serves as like your operating system of the way that you are, like, what is that?
Oh boy, that's I'll make this up as I go, right?
Sure.
so I think, again, if you can find something that you're passionate about that changes everything, I think that helps. But you just have to keep going, because you're going to get, especially when you're doing something significant, you're going to run into barriers, and you just have to believe that no matter what happens, there's always going to be a solution.
Yeah, I think a lot of sort of becoming successful or finding your path is becoming more self-aware about who you are and what you're good at. How would you advise our listeners to sort of figure out what that is for them with intentionality? How do they become systematic about that?
I think you can look inside yourself and say, what is it that I do that I never really get tired of? And or what are the things? Sometimes people think they're passionate about something, but they get tired of it quickly. And I think if you can find the things that no matter how many times, pepperoni pizza, no matter how many times you eat it, it still tastes good, right? And so if you can find the things that no matter what, you're still passionate about them, then you're going to have a pathway that you can follow.
Yeah. Love it. Well, Michael, I guess close us out. Like, if there was one piece of advice that you could give our audience or listeners, and you just had like one moment with them, hey, to be successful, do this. What is that?
I think understanding where you get the knowledge in the world today. For my generation, it was a lot more from books. So I was a big fan of the 7 Habits. I was a big fan of Simon Sinek's Start with Why. And I think you can use those kind of things to build your foundation. Nowadays, I've got a 14-year-old son. He doesn't read as much, and for a while I was distraught about it, but I could talk to him about anything. So he's got this supercomputer in his hand all the time in the form of an iPhone, and he can research things that you and I didn't dream about when we were younger. And so I think you have to keep learning, and when you're learning, you're asking questions, and when you're asking questions, you're growing. And those are the things I think that you really have to do.
I love it. Michael, tell our audience where they can check out your book, follow you online, support your enterprises. Tell us all that.
Okay. The book is Broken Handoff, and it is on Amazon. That's always the best place to get books these days. I'm the CEO of a company called Back to Space that I'm very passionate about. I think it's going to change the world. And I'm very proud of a program we put together that you mentioned called Space News Flash. It's on YouTube. Very few people know this. The lady who does that show is named Danielle Russa, and the space buffs out there will get it immediately. Stuart Russa, Danielle's grandfather, went to the moon on Apollo 14, and so now. Remember, Apollo 13 was the one that had huge problems on the way to the moon, right? So the next guys that went were Apollo 14, and that's her grandfather. And so Danielle is sort of a combination of the granddaughter of an astronaut and an actress comedian. And so throw all those things together and put them in the Space News, and voila. Go watch Space News Flash. It's a blast. We have a good time with it.
I love it. Awesome. Well, Michael, we'll make sure to have all your contact information and links to Space News Flash in the show notes. And this has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
All right. Thank you, Julian.
Yeah.
Okay.
And everyone else, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success. As always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Pathways to Success.